So now that you have a good overview of how the web works behind the scenes, let's learn about what back-end web development actually is and how it compares to front-end development, because this is a very important distinction in the web development world. So in order to distinguish between the front end and the back end of a website and of web development as a general, we still consider the same client-server architecture that we talked about before. So in general terms, front-end development is about everything that happens in the web browser. So it's about designing and building the final website that's going to be visible to the user, and therefore the name front-end. The front-end developer uses the basic technologies HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, which together form the front-end technology stack. Now, many modern front-end developers add more stuff to the front-end stack, like React, or Angular, or Redux, or GraphQL, or whatever is cool these days. So these technologies make front-end development easier, and all these technologies together that a developer or a team decides to use on the front end is their front-end stack, okay? And you probably already know most of this stuff anyway, but I still want to give you a brief overview of how everything fits into the bigger picture here. Alright, and now moving on to the back end, this part of web development is about everything that happens on the web server, so everything that is invisible to the final user, and therefore the name backend, okay? And since we're talking about the server side now, let's actually define what a server really is. Well, a basic server is really just a computer that is connected to the internet, which first stores a website's files like HTML, CSS, and images, and second, runs an HTTP server that is capable of understanding URLs, requests, and also delivering responses. So this piece of HTTP server software is what actually communicates with the browser using requests and responses. Therefore, it is like the bridge between the front end and the back end of a website or web application. Now, a simple web server like the one I just described is called a static server, because all it can really do is to serve static files to the client via HTTP. If you just need to host a simple website, then this is really all you need. But if you want to take it to the next level and create dynamic web applications that talk to databases and all that good stuff, we use a server that is also capable of running our dynamic applications, just like the code that we wrote and executed in the intro section of the course. This is then called a dynamic server, where we have our app running, an HTTP server, and of course the files all talking to each other. And in some cases, that's all we need for our applications. But usually, when we build dynamic websites or apps, we will also use a database, which we can access right from our applications. By the way, if the term static and dynamic websites or applications are a bit confusing for you, no problem, we will talk about that right in the next video. Anyway, we can use the database to store stuff like users, or application data, or text to fill up a website template. In any serious application, there will always be a database, and our backend code will communicate with that database. So some usual stuff that is handled on the backend, or the server side as we can also call it, is to create user profiles, perform logins, send emails, handle payments, retrieve and send requested data from a database to the client, manipulate data in the database, fill up website templates, and so much more. And we will do many of these exciting things throughout the course, actually all of them really. Now about the technology, as you can guess, we are going to use Node.js as a dynamic web server and MongoDB as our database. So that is our backend stack. But there are so many different backend technologies and stacks available for the backend. Things like PHP with a MySQL database, or Python with a PostgreSQL database, or some people use Ruby on Rails, maybe with even some other database. But since you want to learn Node.js, well, we're going to use exactly that. And the most popular database that is used with Node is without a doubt MongoDB, and so that is our choice for our back-end stack. Now you might have heard the term full stack before, and that simply is the front end plus the back-end stacks together. So a developer that does both front-end and back-end development can call himself a full-stack developer. But these developers are getting increasingly rare, especially because the front end is becoming more and more complex these days. Finally, another thing that I wanted to quickly mention is that, as you can see, we're going to use Node applied to backend web development, and not something like hardware programming. So you can technically use Node for stuff like flying drones, programming robots, or developing software for IoT devices. But that is outside the scope of this course. If you want to program IoT devices with Node, well, this course is still going to be useful for you. It's just not the focus of the projects that we're going to build. Okay? Alright, and I guess that summarizes the difference between the front-end side and the back-end side of web development, so that going forward, you have a good idea of the domains where Node.js is actually used in the real world.